Good afternoon, everyone. Let's open this Finance, Audit and Risk Committee and call for apologies. Councillor Robert Ketu. And we've got Councillor Sam and Councillor Wayne on Zoom. Hi, guys. So can I have a mover for Councillor Roberts' apology, please? I've got hands all over the place. Thank you, Councillor Todd. Second, Councillor Joe. All those in favour, please say aye. We've got two requests for public participation. Viv Bold on 7.1, the operations activity update, water and waste services. Viv, if you want to come up to the speaking table, that would be appreciated. And of course, you have standing orders require you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could we have a page number, please?
Page 15.
Just minor things, really. Sorry. Thank you. I wanted to know, really, things like in the original draft on the Horizons put out on the pot, things like do they have the same facility as the landfill have, like the NLG? There is a provision in conditions 25 to 30 for the Waiwere Waitua Enhancements Strategy, which is a working party looking over things. And I just wondered, had they actually been put in? There is a referral by Horizons by the regulatory manager to be shown in the next annual plan, condition 31. The other thing that I really wanted to look at, because of the simple fact that I am picking up on the grades of water coming through, and stream 4, which is the one closest to the beach, is dirtier than the one stream 2, which infers to me that there's a lot of other foreign matters getting into the stream that are supposed to be sifted out and need to be looked at. It all relates to the Muri and the why of the whenua, okay? The other one that I noticed in here, Horowhenua Alliance have done their graphs a whole lot different to what they normally do. This one's so much easier to read. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at page number 20, where they haven't really got a grid or anything. They've just got A, B, C in it. Nothing refers to anything. The one that I've given Grayson to anybody who wants to have a copy of, you will see that they've actually got the snapshot leakage calculations from Hokio, Ohau, rural zones, urban zones, live-in, and it goes from the mountain to the sea. So much easier to read. I realise we have a different CEO over at the moment, but I would really like it to go back the old way. Okay, that's about me. Thank you very much, Lee.
Thank you. Just turn your mic off. Thank you. Thank you for that. Those questions will be referred to the Chief Executive, and he will, or she next week will respond in due course, and we'll take your comments about the snapshot on board. Thank you. Thank you. I understand the new Chief Executive starts on Monday. Next speaker is Charles Rudd.
Sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, could I please have a copy of your...
Committee. Greetings and salutations, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, governance, operations, and members of the public. I'm basically speaking about bullet point 3. It's a well, I'm talking about roading in general from bullet point 3 because you've got financial things and whatever. Okay? So from that, what I'm going to talk about, and you mightn't like it and probably trespass me, it's about time this council wakes up to the reality of what is happening in this district instead of wasting ratepayers' money on patch-up guinea pig experiments. Roading, Hakea Beach Road. 13th of December 2021, plus roads flooding from the Hakea stream and the sandals in the area of the Tartness property near the old live-in landfill. Responses from HDC, Horizons Regional Council and the Emergency Civil Defence was pathetic, dismal and ignorant and arrogant. The residents of Hakea Beach Township were left to fend for themselves. Many of the residents and others' vehicles were severely damaged by their motors getting flooded out. A lot of them were just write-offs, right? And could not get through the flooding for food, medicinal supplies or important appointments because of. There was nothing from this council or Horizons or Civil Defence. There was nothing for these people. Viv, Bold and myself did our best to communicate the problems with HDC to no avail. But in saying that, respects to YP Ward Councillor Christine Mitchell, who tried the best she could. Respects to you, Christine. I really give that to you. And so does Viv. And the council's belated patch-up job is pathetic and is not up to standard expected. Now, I had a simple solution on the first day of the flooding when they had no sign. But no, the manager couldn't care two hoots. Right. The latest resealing of the Hakea Beach Road, okay? Another job not well done, and the contractors cannot be blamed for that debacle. Example, the State Highway 1 going out to Hakea Beach Road, the potholes are not fixed or resealed. Go and have a look. The road was supposed to be resealed. It's a joke. The roadway around the corner from the Arawhata Road westward going up the hill before the top near the Hakea Sands Road on the left side of the road centre has at least a 4-inch drop. A 4-inch drop from the centre line. Now that's been resealed. In a wet event, a car can go up that road and go over the bank and someone get killed. Sealing it does nothing, not when there's a 4-inch drop on one side of the road. You know, wake up you people. It's very dangerous if the wet weather conditions, someone's liable to be killed in an accident in that vicinity, and I really mean it. And that's going to make you all liable if that ever happens. I'll take you to court for manslaughter. And I will. Those of us who like to keep our area nice and tidy by mowing our piece of the road reserve berm, right? The recent resealing has an overkill of stone chips on the side of the lawn, drastically affecting our lawnmower blades. Why wasn't the excess stone chips vacuumed up? There's a truck that can do that job. You know, when you think, what was how much does it cost for a kilo of that wood, that stone chips? 50 cents a kilo? So how many thousands and thousands of dollars of ratepayers' money has been wasted? Still there on the sides of the Bombay Road. Tell me. Equate it. Jeez. And that's what I'm saying. What is the finance cost to us ratepayers regarding the excess stone chips that are just laying there? Get a consultant to go and work it out. I'll work it out for you. Kia ora, tātou. He pātai, any questions?
Thank you.
I care for the people. I care for health and safety.
Councillor Todd.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Charles. Just out of curiosity, that pothole you're talking about down Okio Sands Road, you,
Coming out of Beach Road,
yeah.
and then come on to State Highway 1, that's right there.
So where Gypsy Caravans used to be is on your left-hand side. Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kia ora. There are, back to the agenda, there are no late items. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest for items of decision? There are none. Confirmation of the minutes held 30th of March. Moved Member Bryan, seconded Councillor Ross. Any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. It's carried. Announcements. There are no chair announcements, no announcements. First item of reports, item 7.1, page 7. Mr. Maguire and team. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the FAR Committee and members of the public and staff. Just as a quick introduction, to my right I have Troy Bennett from the Horowhenua Alliance, and to my left I have our roading manager, James Wallace, who will assist in any questions you might have on the two reports in front of you. The other piece of introduction is after some time reporting through the project steering group, the infrastructure groups have brought back quarterly activity reporting to the FAR Committee, so I hope you appreciated the time and effort the team have put in to provide you with an update of what's been happening over the last 3 or so months. Happy to take the reports as read, and the team is here able to respond to any questions you may have.
Are there any questions? Councillor Christine.
Yeah, thank you. This is one that's probably for James. I'm just looking at page 12, the Tavistock Road rehabilitation. And it basically says that, where are we? The most cost-effective solution to maintaining these roads is to correct the pavement shape and reseal when the condition deteriorates to a point where the level of service is no longer acceptable. And as someone who's been driving down that road for several years thinking the level of service hasn't been acceptable, who determines when that level of service is not acceptable? What's the criteria for that?
Thanks for the question. I'd say the little piece of information that's missing from there is also as budget and resources allow. You're right that it hasn't significantly deteriorated in the last 12 months. It's been in poor shape for a long time. And we've got a Forward Works program of rehabilitation projects. And we got down to the Tavistock Road part of the list this financial year. So we've known it's needed to be done for quite a while. It's in terms of the technical reasoning behind needing it, we look at a few different factors, including roughness and also the importance level of the road. So we're quite concerned with Tavistock Road. It's often used as an emergency bypass route for State Highway 1, so it affords it a little bit more priority than other roads in our district that might be of similar condition.
Okay, so it's really more to do with budget, probably, than, yeah. So is there any way that we can bring some of those sort of roads forwards before they get really, really awful, or is it all to do with our funding from Waka Kotahi and how everything fits in?
So yes to both. You're right in all quarters, but it's a balancing act. We've got a significant amount of roads that need repair. We get a certain bulk fund for funding assistance from NZTA, and James and his team use a deterioration model to look at ride quality, geometry, safety, the speed environment, the types of vehicles on the road. Plus we have to weigh that up against the cost and the resources that are available, from which we have generally over the summer months to fit a lot of work into a short sort of 3-month window. And in the last few months, Tavistock came up and it got treated, as did some of the other roads in the report. As we will start to get around the network every summer, we do this sorts of work as a matter of course.
Councillor Sam?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a question for James and Brent, possibly. Just in relation to page 9 and 10, where there's reference to the walking and cycling facilities, and there's commentary there around Waka Kotahi failing to approve the financial assistance rate for those activities. And I just wondered, for the benefit of the thousands of people watching this live stream and also the media, would you be able to just provide an overview of what the situation with that is, and what the impact or what the reasons Waka Kotahi have given for not providing that funding? Because obviously my understanding is that that's not just going to lead to a 2021-2022 financial year impact. It's an ongoing impact for us over the next couple of years. So I think it would be quite useful to sort of contextualise what the impact is, and essentially what does it mean that our community is missing out on.
Yeah, through the chair, and thank you, Councillor Jennings. James and myself will answer within our abilities to answer without putting words in Waka Kotahi's mouths. Just to, I guess, explain the numbers that you're seeing here on page 10, as it relates to our funding assistance. In simple terms, we're funded 60% and council puts in roughly 40%, give or take a few percent either side. What we're doing here is we've pre-agreed in our LTP to fund that 40% for walking and cycling, and so James and his team are coming up with a program to use that money for its exact purpose. What we haven't got available to us is specific funding assistance for those projects from NZTA. Notwithstanding that, many of the other projects that NZTA fund us do have walking and cycling components within them. And so one of the workarounds that we have available to us is to use the other improvements projects and other funding assistance activity classes to add in, where we can, walking and cycling facilities. So James and his team are trying their best to do that. As it relates to why we were rejected in the first place, look, I would only have to speculate, and I'm sort of loath to do that right now. But at the time, there was a lot of pressure on, if members will recall, NZTA trying to balance their National Land Transport Fund, in particular around escalation of costs. There was several issues as it related to their major projects in that space, and so sadly, one of the victims of that rebalancing was this activity class fund.
Thanks, Sam. 3.1.3, a report, White Bay Creek culvert, and I'm very aware of the challenges you've had in the planning of this with Horizon's requirements. Is there a time frame around that? There's been a fair bit of local commentary and some emails floating around recently.
We're just currently waiting for the box culvert to be finished construction. We're liaising with Horizons directly about the methodology of putting it in. We want to have it in as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I've got 3 questions for this report. The first one follows up the walkways, or walking facilities, sorry. Based on your 60-40 split, that original budget would, am I right, mean that Wakakutahi's contribution would have been 210,000 of that amount, and we would pay 140, but the cost to complete is now 206, which are we now having to pay more, and if so, where are we essentially taking from to make this up? That's the first question.
So with the financials for the walk-in facilities, so the original budget was 350 in the long-term plan. This year, the financial assistance rating is 62%, so we were trying to cut back a fairly committed program to be 38% of what it was, and we've cut it back as far as we could reasonably be able, but a lot of these footpath improvement projects, the new footpaths and roads that have desperately needed it for a long time, and we've made commitments here and there to community members that will be looking to improve footpaths in several areas. And a lot of it is safety improvement related, pedestrian improvements that we just had to prioritise, and we had cut back as much as we could effectively. I think the cycling facilities is forecasted to be spent under the 38% of our shares slightly. So I think if you look at the entire forecast to spend of the land transport activity, where overall the local share will not be more than we originally budgeted for.
So you're balancing overall rather than how it's broken up and presented to us. Okay, second question.
Councillor Tukapua, just out there, I think James, in simple English, is trying to say we didn't want to build half a footpath. So the ones that we've started constructing, we're going to finish. And what we'll do is we'll balance that out with a slight underspend in the cycling facilities, and so then we get a net 38%.
Our second question is page 11 around risk and mitigation of the Gladstone Road realignment. It outlines 3 there, though I kind of take the point on page, I think it's 48, where it's, I'll just go there and read. And this has been coming up for a number of months now, that that's about halfway down the page under road transport. This forecast includes an assumption of that 62% funding. An assumption really is not a guarantee. So is there a risk that if they fail to approve, like they can, or they say, well, actually we can only give you 40, not 60, for that emergency work, where are we? Are we just going to be alone funding the difference or the shortfall? The potential, I mean, because there is a risk, is there not? And it's not stated here, I think is my point.
Okay. There's 2 parts to that question. One is, can I just refer you to page 48? That relates to the operational funding, which was the emergency works application that we've put in. So the team has applied to NZTA for that, and we're just waiting on the button to be pushed. The second part relates to the risk of the project and the risk of that funding coming through. The short answer is yes, there's always a funding risk as it relates to the way in which the Crown enforces its policies. As it relates though to the emergency works, James and his team have got a pretty sound case. The Transport Agency did attend site. They have approved the works. We're just waiting for the mechanics to happen in the background. The risks, though, when we get back to page 11 of the report, relate to the capital project itself, and that relates to the way in which we debt fund this project. And it's no different than those of you in any other part of the infrastructure sector at the moment. We are seeing very, very inflated pricing. We are seeing materials availability issues, productivity issues and the likes. And this is really foreshadowing the situation where it's, for reasons beyond our control, the cost of doing business is just going to climb. And so if you see at the top of page 12, as you turn the page, the manifestation of those risks in simple round figures could be to the tune of about $500,000. That's what we're signalling right now. If we can't value engineer our way through this, if we struggle to get reinforcing steel and concrete, if we struggle to get aggregate out of the quarries, and bitumen pricing the way it's going, this isn't a recurring theme across all of infrastructure, across all of the country at the moment, and we just need to signal this because that's the purpose of this committee.
Yeah, I guess maybe I just not knew that funding lacked the confidence, because prior to the June event that made this an emergency work, we had some works planned up there. There was a slip that came down prior to that, and we had, as far as I was aware, applied to Waka Kotahi, and they said no at that point. So now we're at this stage, and I'm aware of it, and I'm just putting it out there that.
So that's not entirely correct, Councillor Tupua. The funding application for the realignment project was approved. It was approved about 4 days before the second slip came down. So we've been in a position where we've been accelerating that project as quickly as we can, but the original business case and funding application to NZTA, they said yes to.
Is that when Kevin was still here?
Yeah.
It wasn't smooth though, was it? I remember.
It took a little bit of back and forth.
Okay. Yeah. So next question is, well, you've already mentioned the 500,000 that you're signalling. Could you just, because as opposed to the other tables, this one on 12 indicates a cost to complete and then a forecast outturn cost. Could you please explain the two? Difference between the two?
Yes, the numbers are a little confusing, I apologise. And so the anticipation at this stage is the works are potentially could be complete by the end of this financial year. If the materials and other things become available, and our intention is to try and accelerate through. And so trying to represent throughout all of these tables is the forecast outturn to the end of June, June 30. That being the case, to accelerate, there's a likelihood we may get a $500,000 risk, in round numbers, should that those risks eventuate. But that's what it's trying to imply, is the team is trying to get this thing done by the middle of the year.
Are there any other questions on 7.1? Checking the screen. Oh, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you. Yeah, look, just one last question on for Brent on the CCTV program. I think it's on page 17. And so the question just here is, and look, I know you've talked to us a lot about this before, and about what your intention is in this space. And so I just wanted to clarify in terms of in terms of the scheme of the whole network and the many kilometres of pipes that we have, what does the money on on, well, the dollar amount on page 18 actually by us in terms of inspections. Is it how much of a percent of the total network are we actually inspecting? Because I obviously there's been previous discussion around the previous CCTV done, and I guess how long that remains valid for, and how that informs your forward works program. But there seems to be sort of a renewed focus on getting the data to know where we're at and where to throw our resources. But I just wanted to get a sense of, how much inspection work does actually that number buy us? I think it's at bottom of page 18.
Thanks, Councillor Jennings, and through the chair. We have several hundred kilometres of pipes and wastewater, and several hundred in water reticulation and stormwater. The simple answer to the percentage question is that sort of money gets you about 5 to 10%, but which sounds like a small number. But you asked in your original question, what does that buy us? Well, it buys us confidence. It buys us the ability to test our assumptions that go into the various mathematics and deterioration models that the software engineers use to predict programs and predict the asset performance and behaviour. So what it's doing is it's clarifying in many ways some of the instinctive things that Troy and his team see in the field. It's also assisting us looking at pipe sizings. It's helping us, if nothing else, find blockages, which, as the images show, we've discovered several already. But I guess the overall drive for this project is to improve our knowledge and confidence of our asset, such that we provide a far better asset management performance than we have been.
Thanks. And thanks for the report. It's really great. And I hope it doesn't mean we drill down into the minutiae too much, but it's really useful to have. I did have a couple of questions, and thanks, Councillor Jennings. Page 17 was one of mine around the pipes cameras, but 3.1.6 on page 8 speaks to traffic service renewals, and we've got a lower spend there because a lower number of streetlights require replacement, but the traffic signs and the repainting of the road, is there an annual sort of audit of those traffic signs, or how do you know that they're all still fit for purpose? That's question one.
We've got an inspection program. Effectively, every road in the district is looked at least once a month, with arterial roads being more often. So we've got inspections by what we call our cyclic crews, whose job it is to respond urgently to things like potholes and dangerous locations and footpath trip hazards. And as they're doing that, mobile always zipping around the district, they're inspecting the signs and replacing them as needed. But we've got a list and a performance-based level of service in the contract to ensure that the entire network is inspected at least once a month.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and good for the public to hear. 3.2.2, the road safety improvements, 3.2.3 walking facilities, and 3.2.4 cycling facilities. I know those questions have already been asked about the roading fund there, but on the flip side of that, Mr Maguire talked about workarounds within planned work, and I know that Councillor Ferguson from Horizons and myself have been doing some work with your team around some of the potential proposals from the last long-term plan about improving roading infrastructure for pedestrian or cycling use. Is that something you're able to update the rest of the council about briefly now, or would that be better to be done as part of a briefing?
Thanks for the question, Deputy Mayor Mason. I think it's the latter, so we can prepare an answer in the comprehensive style that you'd look for.
Appreciate that. And I think that's an important, it'll be important to bring that because it's quite cool. It's quite exciting stuff potentially in the wings here. 3.5, I think was talking about our water use at being more than the 300 litres per day per person that we projected. It's sort of a 25% per person use, and I just am a bit concerned about that with growth and with the pressures on water. Just more broadly, I know it's probably not an alliance question, but is that something we're looking at doing some education broadly across our community around water saving and what can be done to make improvements there?
Well, there is a little bit of a typo on that, so it's actually 339 litres per person, not 3. Yeah, so it has come down quite a bit since the last report. Sorry about that. But we are actively leak detecting and making sure we're on top of any major leaks. We're doing zone by zone checking and checking for any household leaks as well. So we're actively out there making sure we're trying to get these figures down to where they should be.
Thank you, Troy. Can I just further to that? A month or so ago, we asked whether it was possible to break down commercial versus household water use. Does that 339 include the commercial use, or is it just household?
It's just household use. So the commercial use is taken off there.
That's good. Page 18, 3.4.2. How often are you having to remove entire trees just in regards to the root damage inside the actual water pipes themselves?
If trees are in a parked area, we wouldn't remove them. We'll just clear so it would make too much damage. And so we just get in the root cut and get rid of those roots. The system is quite old, so with the CCTV work that we are doing, we do pick up those faults and do clear them when they are picked up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can I too thank the team for the report. It's great to see. Just in terms of the inference around a couple of the consenting issues with the bridge and Gladstone Road, is that's not reaching any critical stage at this stage, or are they, relatively on time?
There's a couple of consenting issues that have been named as risks throughout both of the activity reports. As you would have picked up, we have the privilege of time at the moment, and in a sense, I guess the net impact is just on cash flow. But for the bridge, the Gladstone Road, if you recall, under the emergency works provisions, we can work at the same time as we're waiting for the decision. There is another conversation in here about Cobdura Road that is reliant on a bit of a consent, and then as we move into the water reservoirs and the likes, there are consenting issues that rightfully need to be named as risks because we're acting at the moment on the assumption we're going to be granted a consent. But notwithstanding that, we've got good teams, good people, good advice, and we've given ourselves sufficient time to navigate the process.
And another question I had was in relation to the 3.4.3, the water intake. I assume with the change of direction of the river, that was a major cause of why we are currently having restrictions in terms of our water usage. One, I suppose, is how long do you anticipate that might continue, those restrictions? And also, I know there has been some talk at some stage about another intake and maybe moving our current one. Is that still being talked about?
Thank you, and through the chair, and I'll get Troy to help with the answer. So the water intake, you're quite right. On page 19, we had to wait for a bunch of rocks. It's very hard to find rocks in the North Island at the moment. So that work is underway, expected to take a couple of weeks to get the river channel back over the intake gallery. Yes, that has had an impact on our ability to draw water down, which is why we're at level 3 in the area at the moment. The work is being performed under emergency works provisions, and hence we can get in there and do the work now. The other part of your question, Troy, did you want to take it?
So with the restrictions, it's river flow, so it's just how much is running down the river at the time. It's percentages, so when the percentage comes up, the restrictions come off. We got down to about 22% in the intake. With the current work that's happened on site, we're back up to about 37%. So it's definitely made a difference, and we're just monitoring that and make sure that we don't have to do any more work on site.
Yeah, so thanks, and councillors will recall during the LTP, we actually approved a second intake through what was called a resilience funded budget to actually put a second intake in. That work is just being designed and progressed at the moment. The challenge, of course, is to locate it in an area that this very instance doesn't happen again.
I see, Chairman, I've been promoted to Councillor Sam Jennings today, so... on the report overall, you've spent a lot of effort, I know, in looking at the cost escalations, and I know a lot of work has been done. And I just want to know what your level of confidence is in the work we've done to date, because some of the things we're seeing around the country on cost escalations are pretty frightening, and I'm just wondering if we have taken enough into account.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings, an insightful question. You're quite right, and part of that discussion would probably be would be had with the Chief Financial Officer at the same time, and so myself and Jacinta have been working to the best of our knowledge to ensure that there's sufficient wriggle room in the budgets going forward. If I had a crystal ball, I could tell you the shape of the economy going forward. So we can do what we can reasonably foresee right now. But there's always the risk of a surprise. And part of what we're starting to identify through these reports now is a little bit of preparation for those kinds of surprises. And so some of the numbers in here are deliberately conservative to try and give us enough room for those surprises. Of course, the teams will do their best to restrict the costs and the outputs. But the answer lies in our team's instinct and knowledge of the marketplace, but also the way in which the Chief Financial Officer and her team accounts for that and balances that within the annual plan and the remainder of the LTP.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I've got a quick technical one, and I've had it explained to me, but maybe on page 22 and 23 we've got some nice little abbreviations. TOC, I wonder whether we could actually just have that in full next time. Maybe you want to explain it to the public in due course. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and apologies. We get stuck in our own little world of language. TOC stands for Target Outturn Cost. which is an alliance term which is effectively a proxy for their annual budget.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions? Therefore, if we go back to page 7, do I have a mover for the recommendation? Thank you, Mayor Burney. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Todd. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, those against carried. Thank you, Troy and James. I think you, Brent can't leave the table just yet. He's got another item he needs to talk to. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Brent, your next report, item 7.2, page 25.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, so apology, I missed my note for the start of declaration. Can I just declare that I want to partake in the discussion on this report on item 3.1.3, Taraika?
Thank you. I don't think we're actually making a decision, but noted, thank you. It's noted, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And part 2 of the infrastructure update is the infrastructure development group. And just for your benefit, that's the group that looks primarily at major capital growth projects, but also incorporates our land development engineering activities. And so the report before you is a summary of the key projects that the team was looking at, and we've also added a quarterly report, just in simple summary form, to the land development activity that we have seen over certainly the last quarter, but there's a couple of data points in there showing annual trend. Happy to take questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Page 27, regarding the Surf Life Club. There's a mention there about the external funding and that they were looking for other avenues if they were not successful. Just wanted to know, is there a detailed plan B if there is a shortfall, who ends up paying?
Yeah, Councillor, that was going to be my answer. That's probably best returned under a briefing, and then we can make that available as councillors had a chance to assess our options.
At the bottom of page 26, now if you can't answer because it's sensitive at this stage, then just later. But what is the location for the land 1.2 million?
Thanks, Councillor Tukapua. It is somewhat constrained by commercial terms. I guess the secret's in the heading. It will be aligned between Queen Street and Tauranga Road for the purposes of containing stormwater from Taraika.
Okay. And I just have a comment about the item on page 29 that I guess for me, I don't know about others, that's made some progress since at least the last update or the last I heard around that, which is good because I mean the completion date is 2031, so that's what, 9 years away or something. And it's good to know that the consent effectively going to be lodged at the end of June. Puts us on track in terms of, you know, if there was that, hopefully not Three Waters handover, that, you know, this is definitely a priority for us in the future, and that they better do it if, it's not ours to do later.
Chairman, I'm not sure if there was a question in there, but we'll take the compliment as a team, and just for the purposes of this meeting, we have got a very highly experienced group of people looking at this, and so I've challenged them to put the foot down and get the application in, because as Mayor Wandin pointed out, consenting becomes the primary critical path item for us, and the sooner we get it in, the sooner we can uncover what some of the issues may be, and we can set to on resolving those.
Thank you. Councillor Sam?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, also just on page 29, look, I did want to commend you and your team, Brent, for the progress made under this item. I think this is, again, one of these things that we're perhaps not celebrating enough. I mean, this is one of the most significant projects in our district's history, and it will be, significantly enabling as part of our growth journey. And I reflected particularly on that second bullet point about the 700,000 cubic meters and enough for 37 days worth of storage for live-in. I guess my question about the reservoir is, and you may be limited in what you can say in this public setting, but I really wanted to get into the risk space. And from my perspective, or my understanding, I guess there's probably a key risk around the Horizons regulatory approvals. And I guess I wanted to get a sense of how they are viewing this project, and whether they are clear on its importance in terms of our growth projections and enabling growth. And secondly, just to invite you to I guess, flag any other sort of key risks that you see at this point that that we need to be across.
Thanks, Councillor Jennings, and look, through the chair, look at this project in two parts. One is the access water from the river, which is effectively a consent in its own right. The second part is digging a big hole and filling that hole up with water. They are integrated but very separate. The digging the hole part is actually reasonably straightforward as earthworks, and for the most part is under this council's authority. The primary issue that as a council we need to look at is the access to the water itself, and the hydrology, and the way in which that river is managed in high and low flows, and the way in which the intake is constructed, the way in which we propose to be sympathetic to the receiving environment. Which is why I've asked the team to get the consent application in early, so we can have that engagement, as you point out, Councillor Jennings, to start to actually run that engagement in a reasonably formal process, so we can get the formal questions back, and the team has time to work through the various options that we have in order to try and make this succeed. You're quite right, Councillor Tukapua. In the LTP, it's not for 7 or 8 years, but we do anticipate something of this magnitude will take several years to consent. So we have, every journey starts with the first step, and the first step for us was to get a very confident proposal together, and you're seeing in page 29 there that we've built a pretty good story. The next step we have to take is find out what the people think, and part of doing that is by lodging a consent application, knowing that it will be notified, knowing that it will go through the hearings process, and it will draw out lots of submissions. We have the benefit of time to deal with that.
Thank you. Councillor Victoria, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did, on page 28 regarding the wetland planting design. I just wanted to know that whoever's doing that project, are they going to be collecting plant species relevant to that area for the wetland project?
Yes, that's exactly the intention.
Councillor Todd?
Brent, once just on this report and your last report, I found them really, really
efficient and easy to read, and I just like to they're the best reports that I've seen come through from your team, and I appreciate the effort that's gone in from both of them, and I just wanted to you to put that through to both your teams, please.
Thank you. Gratefully accept all compliments today. Thank you very much.
Are there any more questions? This is probably not a question. It's more of a statement. If we just circle back to page 29 and following on from Councillor Sam's question about the risks around the dam, I think as we go through this project, obviously the first cab off the rank is obviously to get the consent, and that's the biggest risk. Then as we probably go through the design and then the build, I'm sure there are, knowing other projects of even a larger nature, I'm sure they're going to be replicated here. We probably need to fully understand what are the risks around that, as you say, digging of a hole and filling it up with water. So I just appreciate, as you go through you're saying you've done the geotech, and as you go through then the seismology, etc., until you actually build the thing, there's no such thing as a risk-free environment. And maybe we can just explore that as we go through this project. Sorry? Oh, absolutely. Where you go there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The privilege of being infrastructure group manager is I'll get to use plain English. Notwithstanding that, the construction of a substantial 700 cubic metre reservoir does come with some heavy engineering, and we will ensure that we have the best team doing the best design to manage those risks.
Yeah, that just because you've got the best team doesn't eliminate the risks. I think mitigate, eliminate, take your pick. Right, okay. Semantics. Right. Trust me. Right. We go back to page 25. We've got a recommendation. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Member Brian. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Todd. Or any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, carried. I'm sure Member Jackson is doing that deliberately just to catch me out. Right, next item, Treasury Report, page 33.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments in relation to this report, and they're more in terms of updating on what's happened since this report. So we have Standard & Poor's visiting on the 26th of May. So where we did receive a positive outlook last year, we're hoping that that can move to an upgrade this year, but we'll wait and see what happens in terms of that meeting. Some things that we've done to help us move forward to that position are we are looking at this stage to reduce the level of commercial paper that we have down to 10 million, and that will be securing it more in terms of long-term debt. And also what we're planning on doing before the end of May is securing a forward start effectively for any debt that's becoming due in the next 12 months, so up to the end of June 23. What those things do is they, from a Standard & Poor's perspective, in terms of liquidity risk, they up or reduce that risk for us because we have more certainty in terms of access to funds in the long term. So that's what they do. So we've been working closely with our Treasury advisors, Bancorp, to make sure that we're well in place for when that happens. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions? None? Therefore, do I have a mover for the recommendation on page 33? Councillor Ross, secondly Councillor David. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Our next item, 7.4, page 45, our financial report.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I guess the key page on this report is probably page 48, and what that does is that try to outline for you the key at an activity area where we're expecting to spend more or less than we've budgeted for the year. Some points to note there are in relation to the solid waste activity. There is a discussion to be had around the overspend in that activity due to the additional spending that we've had in regards to the professional services in that area. And so there's a conversation to be had about that level of additional debt effectively that we're incurring in that space and how we plan to recover that through rates over time. So that will be a conversation that we can have through future annual plan conversations. As well, the conversation around interest and the fact that we will have up to around 300,000 in terms of interest savings this year, and that's primarily due to the lower spending on the capital program. A decision that you will need to make through the annual plan process is around how that interest saving is used. I put a note in there in the capital spending section on page 51, just noting that if you were to make a decision through the annual plan process to use those interest savings to offset rates for next year, then that could potentially reduce the rates down by 0.7% to 7% in terms of where rates are sitting at this stage. Just to flag that we have a capital briefing in terms of discussing the capital program in more detail on the 11th of May. We also have further briefing booked on the 18th to discuss any other topics that may need to come out of the annual plan conversation. We also have a public workshop that's booked in for the 25th of May, and then we will be looking to make a decision on the annual plan in June. So there's a couple more briefings just to iron out any last details, and when the new chief executive starts, there may be a couple of topics that we want to discuss in more detail. But the thinking is that on the 25th of May, when we have the public workshops, those key topics will be discussed again in terms of what the impacts are, so that the public have a chance to see that conversation, and then decisions will happen in June. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No questions. It's a first. Councillor Wayne and Sam, no questions? You good? Okay. All right. No questions. Obviously, good report. So therefore we go back, don't have to go too far back, to page 74. We've got a recommendation. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Mayor Burney. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Christine. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, those against, carried. Next item, page 75, our risk strategy work plan. You join. That's Ashley, thank you. Do we want to talk about the work program at the same time? Is that?
So Mr. Chair, pardon me. What we're going to do is, if it's okay, is when Ashley talks through the risk report, I think it's important that we talk about the work program as well and when things are going to start coming up. So I'll pass it over to Ashley, but you'll notice that the Ford program is on the screen just so that we can talk through it.
I have nothing further to add other than, as Jacinta has said, we have detailed out in the work program in more detail what month things are going to come up to September, which is not included in the Aon report.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? From a procedural process, what I suggest we... it's Councillor Sam, sorry. You're on the small screen, very small screen, Sam, sorry.
Sorry, were you asking just for general questions, or did you want to cover off some other stuff before you opened up to just general questions about risk, the risk work plan, etc.?
No, I'm happy to take questions on the draft risk strategy and work plan, but from what I was going to suggest, maybe we actually looking to my learned friend on the left, can we actually potentially take them together? So we actually discuss them together because I think they're actually interchangeable. So if you've got a question, Sam, Councillor Sam, floor is yours.
I do. I guess I've got two questions, which is, look, having read through the draft risk strategy and the work plan, I totally understand the direction of travel and view it as a positive. But I guess the question I have is, like, the last 2.5 years I've been on this committee, we've never ever seen a risk register of where we view our key risks at the moment. And I know that we've obviously had risk reporting come through various other reports, including health and safety and infrastructure reports, etc. But I see that the risk register is scheduled for presentation in August, but presumably we've already got a handle on some of our risks at the moment, and that this project or this risk strategy is about improving our risk framework and as well as our capturing of risks and therefore our treatment of risks, and obviously the risk register is a key part of that. But and we obviously had that workshop a month or so ago, but I really wanted to get an understanding of how are we getting, and this is probably a question for you, Chair, at the moment, which is how at the moment are we being assured that we have a good handle on what our risks are, what our top risks are, because I feel like it's a bit of a blind spot for me. And should we be getting ourselves up to speed with what those risks are as a separate, I guess, piece of work, as opposed to obviously what is going to roll out over the next 5 to 6 months?
Thank you for that, Councillor Sam. I actually have got the same issues about what are our big risks and how are we then actually reviewing those from a risk perspective. And we are in a state of change, and what I am suggesting is following the May Audit and Risk Council meeting, we actually have a briefing with the new Chief Executive and flesh out some of the key risks or key strategic risks that Council identified as part of that workshop a couple of months ago, and get some alignment and some consistency of view as she slips into her role, and I'm sure she's going to do that very efficiently and effectively, but so then we actually get some assurance what her view of the world is and what our view of the world is and how they align before we go too much further down the track. And I think that would be actually quite a good, useful discussion going forward. Doesn't need any form, but I actually totally concur that there are a number of significant emerging risks facing the sector, and they are ever changing, and I think we probably need as an informal discussion, whether that's at the end of the meeting, which is open to the public, or a briefing. I'll take the advisement of the new Chief Executive when I have a discussion with her in due course. Is that where you're heading, Councillor Sam?
Yeah, look, I really support that, and I guess the only other comment I would make is it would be probably helpful, and sorry to put this on Ashley's to-do list, but to share a copy of the, I guess, the summary notes of the actual workshop and the risk mapping that we did, as well as maybe even the current risk register, so that we can just, I guess, tune into it and make sure that we go into that conversation with the new Chief Executive at the end of May, because obviously we'll also be doing annual plan discussions at that point as well, and having a good understanding of what some of those risks are and how we're dealing with them might actually then translate also into a need for specific actions or budget allocations through the annual plan process.
Can I just, my view is I wouldn't want to see the entire risk register that might go on for a number of pages. But what I would encourage staff and certainly the new chief executive is probably to bring their top 10 risks and the top risks that the elected members had around their workshop and see what alignment there is. I think that would probably be a very useful start. The risk register, I know I've seen one or two in my other roles, and some of them go on for pages and pages and pages, and I wouldn't want to necessarily burden both staff and council with that at this stage, considering it is actually already on the work program. That would be my suggestion. Councillor Joe?
Thank you, Chair. And look, thanks for the report. To be fair, it left me feeling a little bit underwhelmed because I do think, we went through the Council Mark program and we had a lot of conversation about risk and about improving our understanding of risk. So I really would like to see this linked back to Council Mark and those that commentary that came through there. But I guess I'm feeling a bit concerned because we are in, this 2022 is an election cycle, and I see 2023 rollout elected member training program phase 1. I think that's something for 2022. I think, I recall when I first got on council, risk was something that was left till a bit later in the training, and it's got to be up front. It's got to be what's front of mind, because we just heard our infrastructure manager talk about the risk of a surprise in relation to planned big infrastructure or any infrastructure. And I know we were challenged through the Council Mark process about, what could go wrong or what could derail us. Think about those things that could trip us up. So what council laws and governance need to get on top of is what is what we need to know in order to make decisions well and understand the risks. So yeah, I really think this needs to be strengthened for us, but also for future councils.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether elected members' training, once you've been sworn in, will actually have time. My concern, I would actually say my professional advice, what I would want to see that certainly the risk training undertaken formally in February 2023 rather than the whole of 2023. I'd like to, you get your, by the time you get your council committee set up, etc., then it's almost Christmas time and you've got other things. But I think, yes, certainly early 2023 would be the latest. And I think that's probably what I'm saying.
To reassure Deputy Motion, we're talking a training program rather than an induction program here. And the induction program has already been started to be worked on now, is my understanding. And I know the incoming Chief Executive was one of her targets for her first 120 days as well.
Just a couple of quick comments, and I get the comments made by the Deputy Mayor, and I accept those provisos. Having said that, this report to me signals a good start to the journey. The focus areas identified from page 107 on do give us something concrete to work with and to work through into the future. As other councillors have already identified, we've seen at a very succinct level through the infrastructure reports how you can, in the scope of just a few lines, identify risk and identify mitigation in very simple few lines. That embedding that into every report, I think, would be an outstanding thing to do. And just a final comment to you, Mr. Chair, you identified the desirability of either a briefing or a workshop following the next meeting, which I do support. But I think we need to ask the question today, why would it not be an open workshop? There may be good reasons, but I just think we need to signal that, because at the end of the day, what we're talking about, this is probably one of the most important items on the order paper moving forward, and I think it's important that we take the public on the journey with us.
I don't disagree. It potentially should be in in public, there might be some risks that we might want to actually talk about that might be confidential. That's all I'm signalling. Councillor Sam, you've got your hand up again.
Sorry, just one last question. One thing that's not covered in the report, which just made me think, is this work program actually budgeted? As in, is this captured in our proposed forward budgets, or is there an additional rating impact in terms of that's going to impact us through this annual plan? Like, is this going to be a big chunk of additional operational expenditure that's going to come into the budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the funding for this year for the work that we're doing with Aon to set up the framework, the templates, and work through this initial bit, we have some funding available for internal audit. So from our perspective, this is a good practice in terms of using internal audit budget. We've had a look at our payroll, and this is also another item that we're using within that budget to make sure that we're well set up in this risk area. So we've used that budget for this year in terms of, and also we have one staff member who starts next week, who will be the person focused on risk, and they're factored into the annual plan process already.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other? So what I'd suggest we do is we go back to, I'll say where I am, page 75. Yes, we have got, it's 99 I should say, 7.5. We've got recommendations there. I suggest we move those, and then do we need actually a move in a second for the work program, or do we just note some changes? Because I've got some suggestions in terms of we do. I've got some suggestions in terms of changes. So we'll take the recommendation for page 99, move it. So David moved that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Christine. All those in favour, please say aye. Now, in terms of the work program, what I'm suggesting is that do we actually want to formally note some additions to the work program as part of the resolution, or are we just happy that staff just note them? I've got, and we'll get kicked under the table in a minute, there's one here that I would like to see that we haven't debated, that in May, that we actually see the audit plan from Audit New Zealand, which has nothing to do with Ashley's work, but it's something that we need probably see that as part of for the annual report.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I smile because we are actively, I guess, in a bit of a negotiation with Audit New Zealand about their delivery and making sure that we're receiving things on time to enable us to do the work that we need to do. Our management letter has still not arrived for the last financial year. Our debenture trustee audit still hasn't arrived. And in terms of the service delivery, I've been in active conversations with the Office of the Auditor General and the Audit Office about that. And also our timing for the annual report for next year is currently scheduled for December rather than earlier in the year. So we're trying to negotiate but having some difficulty with their resourcing. So where some of the questions are coming around putting that on the agenda is to encourage from a different angle some service delivery improvements from Audit New Zealand.
So what you're doing is you're supporting that it'll actually formally go on the work program for May, and then that be conveyed to Audit New Zealand for their achievement. All right. So we've got, I think also, Councillor Jennings, I think there was an apology. We also wanted that in June we were going to talk about delegations. I think we've talked about that before. Is there any other amendments to the work program? Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. The audit plan from Audit New Zealand. Yep. Are there any other changes. Any other? I need my bifocals. No, my yeah, see that. Yeah, got it. Thank you. Nothing further.
I was just going to point out that delegations is already in that June one. You don't need to have it. Ah, okay. Separate, I think.
No.
Can we just clarify the delegations? The delegations policy, I believe, is the same thing as the additions around delegations. Yeah.
Yeah, just to clarify, it wasn't on our report that we got on our agenda paper. So I Jacinta and I had exchanged an email over it. So I think it's been added on there, which is great. So that's, yeah, perfect.
I don't think we need, for the actual work program, I don't think we need that briefing with the new chief executive. Is actually it's not actually a work program, it's more of a briefing that's to be scheduled. People happy with that? All right. Therefore,
Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Sam, sorry.
Chair, can I just clarify, you made a comment about the Audit New Zealand letter, I think a letter of engagement or management letter. And I just wanted to understand from you whether, is it through that letter that we set the scope of activity that we would like Audit New Zealand to look at, or is the scope of that letter them telling us what they're proposing to look at?
So my understanding, the audit plan says basically it's a draft audit plan that should come to council to saying these are the things that the auditor are planning to look at and the associated timing, and it should be a draft letter. Then we can negotiate, for the want of a better word, what is actually that work program and the associated costs, because unfortunately there's no such thing as a free lunch. But yes, absolutely. So if we're saying is that if we want, as a council, we want Audit New Zealand to look at something that's within their gambit as part of the annual report, we can request that they do it. Absolutely. So that's why I'm saying is that audit, and that's part of the audit plan.
Okay, and so the decision making around that and the ability for elected members to have input into that, is that what you're scheduling in for?
Yes.
June or May, June?
May,
is that correct?
yes.
May, okay.
I would have actually liked to seen it last month. I actually saw one a couple of months ago. All right, any further questions, comments? Yeah, absolutely.
True, Mr. Chair. Councillor Jennings, one comment probably to make is if what's included in the audit plan is and is not something that can be negotiated with them within the fee that they've got, then there is also the opportunity to do that through an internal audit process. If there's a specific area that isn't part of what Audit New Zealand would normally do, then that could be covered through an internal audit process as well.
All right. Happy, Councillor Jennings?
Yeah, thank you. I guess the context of my question was, obviously we had just recently had a meeting regarding the landfill, and there were some aspects that may benefit from a look back. So I guess it would just be good to be able to discuss that at some point in terms of whether there's consensus around the table to include that within a scope of works potentially. So as long as there's a conversation coming up, that's.
Yeah, I mean, without knowing the detail of your issue, I'm not sure whether the landfill issue is something of the gambit of Audit New Zealand in terms of the annual report. But let's just park that for now. It might be a subject of a further review in due course. got no further comments, so I'm happy to move the rest that we actually can we just change 2.3 that the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee notes the amended Finance, Audit and Risk Work Programme. I'm happy to move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Todd. Any further discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Is against, carried. Being no further business, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your participation. Thank you to the press, members of the public, staff. Thank you very much.